Okay, so we gathered for another sculpture forum, and we're going to be talking about a show of work by Mark LaRiviere. Connect my pronunciation, somebody.
LaRiviere.
Riviere.
So,
And thank you, Karen. We are joined. We're delighted. I'm delighted. I am delighted that we are joined for this by Karen Wilkin, the distinguished critic, curator, author, historian, and by Jock Ireland, a regular. We will miss Brant Johnso for this one. Okay, so somebody like to start. This is a modest show
mhm,
of primarily of heads. I forget there were maybe 6 or 7 heads in the show, and two, I guess, half-life size figures
mhm.
in bronze. And it was at the Equity Gallery downtown in Manhattan. Um, I did not know this artist or his work, so I was curious to see it and delighted to have seen it. Um, okay, anybody?
But I was in the same position as you, Garth. I didn't know anything about him, and I have a lot of confidence in Equity Gallery. They show people often who need to be shown, who given the current state of the gallery world, would not otherwise have an opportunity to show. Um, so I'm glad to have seen it. I'm glad to have learned about this. Uh, and that courtyard is such a sympathetic place for putting up sculpture. I think almost anything looks pretty good back there.
Yes, it's a small courtyard at the back of the gallery in the open air, and they usually have sculpture in there. Would you want to say some more about the gallery and the sense you have that it manages to offer some exposure to people who would not expect to get it in the commercial world?
Well, there is, I believe, an organization called Artist Equity,
Yes,
which people belong to.
yes,
Um, but they also, I think, show people who are not members. And I know I was asked to do an exhibition of Clintel Steed's work, which I was delighted to do, and it looked pretty exciting. I frankly don't know whether Clintel's a member or not, or whether they just wanted to show the work. They've shown Catherine Lepp recently, another colleague from the studio school, and it's a wonderful, modest space, but big enough to accommodate good-sized work. They usually have one major show in the front and middle galleries, and then they have smaller scale work in a kind of project room, and then, as you just said, the courtyard. Um,
yeah, yes, Karen. I think you're right about them showing members and non-members work. I'm pretty sure that's the case.
uh, and since so many of the more modest galleries that were showing people who had good track records and made good art, but were not going to be on the cover of Art Forum anytime soon, so many of those galleries are closed. A place like Equity becomes increasingly important.
Yes, I agree. So what did we think of the work? I was surprised that the heads were titled like head of young man or
Mhm.
hero or something because they did seem to me to have uh, they seemed to me to be portraits
I
of,
thought so too.
of particular individuals and so I was kind of interested to know that they were not given titles like Mr. Jones or
Yeah.
Alex Simpson or somebody.
But they clearly were distinct individuals. I liked the heads better as a group, I think, than I would have liked them individually, because of the differences among them, um, which made them more interesting to me than they would have been as isolated works. if that makes
Yes,
any sense.
yes, no, I agree. I agree. The subtle differences within a group of works which
Hmm.
had a lot in common.
Hmm.
Jock, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, um, I should say I know Mark as a friend. I've known him for a number of years, and I'm not close. Not a close friend, but I've seen his work and seen it get better and better, sort of slowly, not dramatically. Uh, and this is I found it was a terrific show, and remarkable for a kind of purity of spirit, um, uh, and that I don't know purity. You know, you're talking about the relationship of the gallery to the sort of the art world or art forum world, and that relation, Mark's work is sort of a lot about that relationship, and the it's interesting the way it kind of opens up something about the contemporary art world. I see Mark's work as almost outsider art, and yet connected to Rembrandt in this sort of purity of spirit sense. And that uh, you know, it's a kind of voice that is we can hear, but we don't hear it clearly. And seeing this work is, uh, you know, exciting for me in that because of that. Um, I think Mark studied at Parsons in maybe the 80s, maybe 70s and 80s, maybe when Leland Bell and Paul Resica were teaching there. And that that kind of educate, you know, Leland Bell is a super sophisticated uh, guy and an intensely sort of ethical guy about painting. And that I don't know lessons like that uh, came through in a lot of other friends of mine from that era. And yeah, uh, I like this work.
Yeah,
uh,
you talk about purity of spirit. Not really sure what that means, but and you also mentioned outsider art. Work by people who are have no formal art training. Um, and I can see why you would mention that, but the work has a kind of innocence, almost a kind of naivety. Uh,
yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
and I'm not sure that I find that appealing.
Uh-huh. Well, you know, just we're looking at the carving now, and while there, you know, you can talk about it as innocence, uh, it's also sort of real carving. You know, a lot of what goes for or gets called carving these days is, you know, people attacking stones with power tools. And there's a sort of instant kind of slickness to a lot of carving these days. But Mark just doesn't skip steps the way that fancy tools allow you to skip steps. And he directly engages with the wood and and tries to pull form out of the wood and in a sort of direct, straightforward way. Uh, and I don't find any kind of false innocence about it. It's pure. It's and it's gotten tougher over the years. Uh, there was a kind of sweetness that, as I say, has gotten tough. Or
Uh-huh.
uh,
Uh-huh.
I hate to say something so obvious, but isn't what you end up with more important when than the tools you use to get there? You
oh
know, it's,
yeah, yeah,
I mean, and that were they all wood? Were
No, I think three of
I
the
think
heads,
they were clay or
yeah.
three,
Maybe
yeah.
uh, but they're the sense in which they were carved, and you know, material was taken away.
Hmm.
Uh, was exciting for me.
Okay.
And it seems to me connected to that sense in which they weren't portraits. They were sort of ideas. Uh, what's a hero? Why a colossal head?
Hmm.
Uh,
I think at least three of the heads were carved out of wood, which was
Yeah.
fascinating to me because they looked like they were modeled out of clay.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not.
I think when no one was looking, we tapped one of them.
I think so. Yes. Yeah, the three at the end that we're
Yeah.
looking at
Yeah.
now, those are all
Yeah.
carvings. Um,
Yeah.
and that those three struck me as the best things in the show, and I particularly liked the one on the right.
Yeah.
This
I
one with
think
the
those were the most recent works as well, I believe.
uh-huh.
I think the two figures were earlier, if
Yeah,
memory serves.
yes,
Uh,
the figures I did not have that kind of
mhm,
outsider innocent. They
mhm.
seemed almost mannered to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I kept going back to these three heads as well. And I think it was because of the uh, sense of individuality in them.
Yes.
As though he kind of is working away at whatever this is until the material was until it started looking back at him
Yeah, I think that's
and took on some kind of personality.
yeah.
Um,
yeah, and it's the wood that began to take on the personality, and his encounter with the wood
mhm,
uh, that some kind of personality came out of that encounter.
He does seem to have a recipe for ears, though.
Well, yeah, but there's
Well,
an
and
abstract
a
set,
bit for eyes too.
yeah, but the relationship between those sort of big eyes
Mhm,
and the whole skull is um, is a considered relationship that
mhm,
and it comes it's an abstract thing. It's not a they're not gimmicky eyes.
mhm,
They're uh, there's you've got to call them figurative, but there's a real abstract dimension to and just a
mhm,
formal sophistication that is um, it's real, at least for me.
mhm,
Yeah, the forum has recently discussed at least two other exhibitions of representational sculpture. Thomas T. Price and a show by
Rebecca Warren.
Becca Warren that we saw. And I found myself reflecting back on those two shows and the conversations we'd had in this show. And it's a bit complicated. Um, but the question of nature of the ambition, I suppose. I'm just throwing that out there
Yeah.
if anybody wants to.
No, I'm also trying to think about artists painters I've been looking at who are dealing with recognizable imagery in a way that might be somehow related to this enterprise. And I'm coming up with such an extraordinary variety of people. I mean, everybody from Kathy Murphy to Janice Nowinski, who couldn't be further apart. And I'm trying to see where this fits in some way to that desire for recognizable imagery. Um,
Yeah, it's an
it
interesting.
does seem a
Yeah,
little bit outside of that.
yeah.
And I
You
don't
don't
mean
see a
that in,
connection with
hmm?
Janice Nowinski,
In well, only in that, I mean, Janice makes these, very modest, small works.
right?
And I I wonder if these were done from observation. Um, I don't know. She works from a pile of family photos and existing images that have caught her eye. And she keeps returning to the same image over many years and treating it differently each time. So I have no idea how Marc LaRiviere works. I don't know enough of his work to know whether he keeps returning to the head, whether he keeps returning to the same person that we recognize. I don't know.
Yeah, and whether he uses models at all,
Yeah, that
models
I
as
don't know. I
well.
don't know
Yeah,
that either. Do you know,
yeah.
John?
No,
No, no, I don't. But I'm not. You know, uh, I don't, I feel he's carried by the material in a way that's very close to the way Janice's
Yeah,
works with paint.
yeah. She's always, they're always primarily about what paints can do. And then the more time you spend with them, the more you realize how specific the figures are without apparently being specific in the first place. Um,
Right.
yeah.
yeah, but it is. I mean, I think it's an interesting question, and I think it affects my sense of what this enterprise is, if he's using models or if he isn't, what the source is, um, what the if you like the inspiration is, you know.
Yeah, but the inspiration is just human beings. And I think it's close to Rebecca Warren. I mean, she has sets up things to get between herself and a straightforward kind of a way of working. Mark doesn't need to set up those sort of artificial barriers, but there's there I you know it's fun for me to see connections to Rebecca Warren's work or Janice Nowinski's, complicated connections, and sort of no connection to Thomas Price.
Okay, well, I'm not sure. There's a lot more to say. So I'm happy to leave it there unless we.
Well, all right, is anyone familiar with Jonathan Shawn's carving
Yes.
Yeah.
and Sidney Geist's? I mean,
Well, I also started thinking about Jonathan Silver,
well, yeah.
who
How do
his
you think about what?
I find those much more compelling.
Uh-huh. Why?
They seem to be very much about, even more about the exploration of materials and how some substance can sometimes coalesce into an evocation of what Michael Fried would call headness. But I know, I've seen infinitely more of Jonathan Silver's work, and I know much more about him. So I'm not dealing with, what is it, seven, eight objects that I'd never seen before. I have a different context.
Yeah, but when I think of Jonathan's work, it's in the context of this show. His sort of super sophistication, I'm struck by how sort of sophisticated and sort of his anxiousness about his sophistication uh, is something that was opened up to me by Mark's work. Uh, and the I don't know, just the
Yeah,
almost hysterical uh, sophistication in Jonathan's work is different from Mark's very sort of relaxed uh, engagement with human beings, with with figures and heads.
Well, maybe you're dealing with different personalities. Um, the most anxiety laden Jonathan Silvers that I know were the ones that he did when he was dying. That may have had something to do with it. Yeah.
I think there's a big difference between Rebecca Warren, Jonathan Silver, and this work, particularly the heads. I mean, I think, as you were saying, Karen, in Jonathan Silver's work, particularly in most of the heads, there's a seeking some kind of distillation and
Mm-hmm.
some kind of essence, um, not of an individual person, but of a head.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
whereas and the figures in Rebecca Warren's show were not individual people in the sense that I think these heads and even the figures um, they offer
Mm-hmm.
themselves as very particular individual people. And you know, I think it matters, you know.
I agree. I mean, I think the individuality is one of the most interesting things about the heads.
Yes, yes, I agree, and I agree with you again, Karen, in that seeing a group of them together makes that very apparent,
Mm-hmm.
and one begins to think, you know, this person is that kind of person. If you met them, he'd be like this or like that, and this other one would be this way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, yeah, but thinking about the three heads together, I sort of naturally think about Matisse's Jeanette heads.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, they start out as, or the first one is sort of clearly a portrait, but he moves away from portrait to, well, the last of the heads is a sort of terrifying uh, spiritual thing. Uh, and Marx seems to move in that direction, you know, in a different way. But you know, he moves away from a particular individual to feeling and sort of emotional content that is, you know, it's more than a, you know, sort of copying reality. It's it's
Which one
daring work. Sorry.
which one do you feel is the most not about a particular individual and the most about something else? I'm not having trouble following you.
Well, they all are, uh, you know, they sort of all about the eyes uh, looking at you, and uh, you know, it's they're connected. You know, they're all human heads,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, uh, he's trying to get at something sort of inside the head rather than you know, trying to do well. You know, Jonathan, it's fair to say that he does get involved with this sort of idea of the head. But as he gets involved with that kind of sophisticated idea, he loses touch with uh, I don't know, something more uh, purely spiritual or
Is that Jonathan Silver you're talking about, or
yeah,
Yes, yes,
okay, it
yeah,
wasn't clear.
yeah.
yeah.
All right.
I wouldn't agree with you. I wouldn't
Yeah.
agree with you there, Jock. I wouldn't agree with you there. I mean, it seems to me that these heads, um, the content is psychological in the sense that you engage them as you would engage another person,
Hmm.
and you're feeling out the way in which this other person is seeming to present themselves as being in a particular frame of mind.
Well, that's the start of it. And all I'm suggesting is that Mark tries to go past that. And he doesn't, he's moving in a different direction.
Well,
He's fully engaged with real people, but he's sort of trying to get inside something.
I'll have to take that on faith because I frankly
Yeah,
don't see it.
yeah,
But
me too, me too. And I don't know that he's fully engaged with real people in the sense that these are made from looking at another person.
yeah, it would really be interesting to know whether he does work from a model. We should have found that out, but we didn't.
Right.
Well, yeah, the models go home. The Mark is going to be in the grave with us all soon. The work is going to stick around, and uh, I think it's going to stick around for good reasons.
Well,
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I've said all I have to say about these, and I'm very interested to hear what the two of you had to say.
Yes, thank you, Karen. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you will continue to join us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, great. Thank you, John. Thank you,
Wait, thank
Nicole.
you, thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Of course.
And
Stop
bye bye.
recording.